Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the replay of this live chat about memory improvement books. I'm going to gather the ultimate list of memory improvement books and I want to give it to you. And that's all going to happen on a webinar later this week /BK at magneticmemorymethod.com /BK. And if you're watching this replay, hit the thumbs up. Let me know in the discussion below where you are in the world, what you're doing and what you're thinking and how you're feeling and things that are going on with your memory and your favorite memory improvement books. We sent out a survey last week about the books that have impacted people, the video courses that have impacted people, and what I did is gathered them all together, and we're going to make a special PDF with all the books that I know, and all you got to do is get registered for this webinar at magneticmemorymethod.com /BK, and I'll share with you the ultimate list of memory improvement books. And on this Hangout, we're going to go through a number of books as well that have been really impactful. But if you're joining us live, make this interactive. Say hello in the chat, hit the thumbs up. Let me know what books have impacted you so we can add them to the list. And we're really excited to get this list out to everybody, because one of the things that happened on this survey that I sent out is that most people mentioned the same books. And there's just a wealth of books, many of them which are actually free, that people didn't mention and they don't seem to know, which was really eye-opening and gives me the opportunity to help more people with more titles that are just incredible. And there's 5 in particular that we're going to talk about on this webinar at magneticmemorymethod.com /BK. And I'm going to unpack 5 secrets, one from each, that I'm pretty sure some of you will already know, but most of you will have never heard of, and you're going to find them very exciting, what they can do for you. So if you're here, let me know where you are in the world. I'm going to do some mailbag, of course, and go through this and talk about some of the most impactful and important memory books in the world. Just waiting for some more people to show up. I know if you're watching the replay, and even if you're with us now, it can be a bit of a drag waiting for people to show up and be interactive and so forth, but that's what live is. But on the private webinars, then of course we start on time and hit the ground running, and that's at magneticmemorymethod.com /BK. Now there's no replay of this 5 memory improvement books and 5 secrets from those memory improvement books. So if you want that session, if you want that training, then go to magneticmemorymethod.com /BK, register. There's a link on the screen here for that. And today we're going to be talking about yet more books and what all this means on the mind map. Been going through mind map mastery really intensively, increasing my memory, my mind map practice, and thinking about what this entails for memory. So Sandra's here from Northern California. Good morning, Sandra. Always good to see your name. And I really appreciate you saying hello. And if you're joining us, thumbs up, let me know where you are in the world. And again, if it is the replay for you, leave a comment. I'm always excited to read the follow-up comments from the people who didn't see these live sessions, and the ones from last week were really quite amazing. And Sarah had a great one as well, just that I saw this morning. So it's worth going through and reading those. You see some links that will help your memory practice, and just knowing what other people are thinking and doing and what they're working on is very enlightening. Jeff's here from Michigan. Hello, Jeff. Thanks for saying hello. Thanks for checking in. Good to meet with you. And wow, Michigan. I've been to Michigan, and really interesting place. A good friend of mine, very well-learned scholar who unfortunately passed away. I'll never forget him taking me to the river or the water there in I was going to say Brisbane, in Windsor, and looking at Detroit and saying, we're actually south of the United States here. I'm like, really? Amazing. So that's a great memory. And I really like Michigan a lot. I've spent a fair amount of time there. So thanks for saying hello. Yeah, we're getting started here, but waiting for a few more people to show up, and we'll talk about what all these images mean and how they can help you improve your memory practice and the books that they're all connected to. So as you're joining us, chat with me a little bit by letting me know what memory improvement books you know, what you've read, memory courses you've taken. Patrick's here from Brazil. Hello, Patrick. Thanks for saying hello. Hit the thumbs up if you're joining us, and let me know where you're in the world. Jeff asks, what do I mean by interesting? Michigan being interesting? Well, let us count the ways. I mean, one of the things that is so interesting about it is that part where Canada can actually be south of the United States, for example. Also, the history of Detroit is incredibly interesting in many ways, not just the automotive industry. That's the standard thing that people talk about it being interesting for, but in terms of music and also in terms of the actual cinema that has come out of there and the way that it's been portrayed in cinema. There's a really interesting Jarmusch movie, for example, that shows that's pretty recent, but nonetheless very interesting. And lots of things come to mind, and having driven through it quite a few times, I have very strong memories of what it looks like there, and having just looked at it from across the water in Windsor, Ontario, and Lake Michigan is, of course, something that we all know from the Great Lakes as one of the major Great Lakes. So it's all very super interesting, and how that whole structure really in that part of the world binds together so many ideas around the world in terms of knowing that acronym of the Great Lakes and so forth. So it's a very memorable thing, and Michigan is part of it. So it's very interesting in those regards. Sandra says, I see you overcame the mirror image change. Yes and no, Sandra, but thank you for noticing. I actually wrote that backwards. So if you're wondering what that is, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/BK. That's an acronym for book, or a short abbreviation rather for book. And we're doing a webinar on the 5 memory improvement books that no one on my email list seems to know from the recent survey, and the 5 secrets in them that you can use to improve your practice. We're going to talk about other books, but not the books that are on that live webinar. So make sure that you go to magneticmemorymethod.com and register for that if you're interested. And if you're joining us now, please say hello in the chat. We've heard from Sandra and Patrick and Jeff, and looking for some more interaction, because that's what makes these interesting. If you have questions about memory improvement, about memory palaces, about memory for anything, please go ahead and be interactive. That's what makes these things fun and memorable. And know that when you open up and get involved, you're learning at a higher level. You're learning in ways that you can't if you're just participating in the back, although that's perfectly in the back of the room, so to speak, the back of the internet room, which is also totally legit. But yeah, I haven't overcome the mirror thing yet, but we're working on this studio here for more advanced live streaming and whatnot, and some new things that are coming. Jeff says that I love that you actually have some knowledge about my home state. Most of it would be just because of Detroit's reputation. Yeah, well, every state has a reputation, every province has its reputation, but it's beautiful territory there, very, very beautiful territory. And yeah, there's some things that obviously make it more well known than others, but in any case, Canadians, especially people in Ontario, Southern Ontario, would tend to know it quite well. So Carlos is here, just joined, but a big fan of yours. Thanks, Carlos, for being here. By just joined, I hope you mean subscribe to this channel. If you're not subscribed to this channel, just hit that subscribe button. We do live streaming quite frequently and get into your questions, go through mind maps together of things that I'm reading, that I'm thinking and preparing. And if you go to magneticmemorymethod.com/BK, you're invited to an exclusive webinar with no replay, 5 memory improvement books that no one seems to know or talk about, and the 5 secrets in them, and we'll go into a deep training there in a private setting. Always Looking Self says, Detroit, some great things with community gardens. Yeah. And Jeff says, I agree. Awesome. Alex is here. Hello, Anthony. What do you suggest to do for improving the ability to put more than one information per location? I mean, I would like to improve the link method combined with the memory palace. Great question, Alec. Well, first thing I would say, or Alex, sorry, I would say that the first thing is that challenge your thinking a little bit. Why is the link method not already a memory palace? It's a location-based mnemonic, no matter which way you shake the stick. So, for example, anything that you link has a location, right? It's either above, beneath, left, or right of something, right? So now you already have a giant clue on how to make every magnetic station in a memory palace already have more than one piece of information, right? So it's really that simple. Every magnetic station, if it's properly created in a well-formed memory palace, has huge potential for multiple variant linking. And I didn't mention the diagonals as well. It just depends on your strategy. It depends on your level of skill. And there are certain techniques. If you heard last week's episode of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, you heard Jesse and I talking about some things. There's a second interview with Jesse coming out this week. If you're on my email list, you'll get it. We go into a special technique that will maximize the space, because there's certain things, the principle of Turgor pressure that I talk about, that will help you maximize that. But you gotta generally, I would say, start with expanding your terminology, because a lot of people, they read all this terminology and they get locked in the terminology. And so one of the things Magnetic Memory Method always tries to do is unlock the terminology so you can magnetize everything that you're doing. And thanks for another thumbs up. Hit the thumbs up if you're just joining us. If it's the replay, thumbs up. And all this emphasis on thumbs up and stuff like that, it's really to tell the robots that you think that this is important information and you would like it to remain on the internet, as the internet is changing and weeding out a lot of things. And it's just like this constant war, and it's almost like ancient Rome, right? Thumbs up, right? And so we're either going to get an internet full of things we don't really care about because we're not engaged enough with the things we do care about, or we're going to care about the things that we care about and show it because we're now slaves to robots and we have to thumbs up to everything. So keep us alive with your thumbs up. And anybody know this? There's a little reference for you. You got to support the people, right? Support the people who are doing good things. So Sandra says, the first book I ever saw in mnemonics was from a 3-day series presented in 1967. It was by a brilliant scholar, Dr. Truman Madsen, How to Stop Forgetting and Start Remembering. Well, thank you for that, Sandra. We'll have to add that to our mega list. So that's cool. And by the way, if you register for this, I'm going to be sharing with everybody who attends this webinar the mega list that I'm putting together for you all. So that's at magneticmerrymethod.com/BK. There's no replay, so you'll need to attend that webinar if you want it. And this is the Magnetic Memory Method. So when I say mega list, I mean mega list. Like it's going to be a magnetic list, and there's nothing like it on the internet. So Harold's here. Hello, Harold. Thanks for saying hello. Always good to see you here. And thanks again for that recommendation, Sandra. We definitely going to include that, and I have to look into that. What I'm always astonished by is that I still run into, and we're going to talk about this, by the way, this penny here. Whoa, I lost my BK. I should have put a stamp there. Or sorry, not a stamp, but I should have put some tape there. But we'll get it back up. Don't worry, this is medieval internet here. Medieval internet. But we have this penny here to represent something that may relate to Sandra's suggestion there, her contribution, Dr. Truman Madsen. I don't know Madsen, don't know for sure, but interestingly enough, this penny has my poor representation of a president's head, and Madison, of course, was also a president, and I've been thinking a lot about memorizing the dates of presidents and whatnot. So let's see if I can balance this again. This is daytime television, people. I don't know how I had it balanced there before. There we go. So one day, don't worry, we'll have like a professional broadcasting team that takes care of all this stuff instead of just little old me. I'm gonna become the Bob Barker, and the price will be right for sure. Anybody get that reference? Curious always about my demographic. I'm feeling so old with my references. Alex says, thank you, Anthony. What do you mean by mega list? For which purpose? Well, I'm at the end, at this webinar, for everybody who attends, you're going to get a PDF that has the ultimate collection of memory improvement books and courses that I know of. And I know of so many more than I did before because I released a survey and people told me a couple that I didn't know, but I actually am surprised by how few I didn't know, or how few I didn't know, and how many repetitions there were, and how few of the classics, like how few of the really, really most powerful books were mentioned, the ones that are going to take your game to the next level. And so we need those ones that are, beginner, entry level, and so forth. And we're going to talk about all of these different kinds of books today, but we can only cover so many. And I'm putting together this list of all these titles. And like obviously it's not going to have every title under the sun listed in it, but it's going to be a mega list and you don't want to miss it. But it's only going to be for people who are at this webinar. So magneticmemorymethod.com/BK. Hopefully I won't knock it down again. And if you're just joining us now, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing. And love to make this interactive. Jeff says, so Anthony, I'm still a newcomer to the whole memory palace idea. Do I have a video on it for beginners, or where would you recommend I start? Great question, Jeff. Thanks for asking that. The classic video series, 4 free videos with worksheets, is still available at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. It's easy to remember because Y is for you, T is for tube. So YT. Magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. Hit that up, go through that material. So many people have, like, they listen to the video, they watch the video, and then the people who succeed, I'm sometimes very astonished by people who email me who clearly haven't really paid it its due attention, because I don't see their homework, right? But the people who really dive into this stuff and just essentially let the rules set them free. That's something Tony Buzan said to me one time. He said, the rules will set you free. And he says it again in his new book, Mind Map Mastery. But sometimes when you hear things from people when you're in person with them or you're hanging out with them, you hear it a lot deeper. It was really amazing to hear things right in front of you with the person that you're with. And that thing of the rules will set you free. And it's very uncomfortable. I have to submit myself to it all the time in order to succeed at anything in life, is what are the rules and submit to them and so forth. But if you take that free course and you just actually do what it's saying, and I'll know whether you did what it's saying or not, because you'll submit a assignment that will unlock you from the tyranny of forgetting if you just take that first step. And everything's about the steps that you take. So hit the thumbs up is a step that you can take that will lead you towards one more step towards engagement and so forth. And it's just a known fact. Even just micro steps, micro engagements are so important to getting results. So if you want to take that free course, it's at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. And you can, of course, get a review of some of these things at magneticmemorymethod.com/BK, where we will talk about the 5 most important memory improvement books I know that no one else has mentioned in recent days, and the 5 biggest secrets inside of them that you can learn from. So you don't actually have to have read the books in order to learn from them. But looks like we have a decent amount of people here. So if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Pop in any questions that you have, and let's expand our understanding of memory techniques, and let's think about mind mapping and think about all these different memory books that we can start to populate and really understand the power that's at your fingertips right now just by learning more about how you can use your mind at a higher level. If that sounds good to you, hit the thumbs up. Let me know in the chat, hell yeah, if you're interested in this, or if we should wait a little longer for more people to show up. Would you like to go through this mind map? Let me know. Let's get some answers here. See who's really interested. And if no interest, chirp, 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 crickets. Well, we could do something else. Could just do this privately here. But imagine what this means and how powerful this could be. Carlos says, yes, please. We got one. All right, good. And I'm pushing for this because it's really, really important. It helps open up the floodgates of the mind. If you're not interested, then that's also interesting to know. Jeff gives me a hell yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And let's see if we can get another one. I'll just have a look here at Tony Buzan's latest book here, Mind Map Mastery. Sorry if it's mirrored there. BK is not mirrored because I wrote it backwards. And if you're just joining us, join me on that webinar. The link is down below, and you can just type in magneticmemorymethod.com/BK. But as we're waiting for like a couple more hell yeahs here before we go through this, this book is really, really extraordinary. Phoenix says yes. Okay, great. There's really a lot of cool ideas here. It's been helping me refine my mind map practice, and I'm actually going to test my memory. Always Looking at Self says yes. All right. I love that name, by the way, Always Looking at Self. As you may or may not know, I'm a little bit of a fan of Vedanta, not hook, line, and sinker, but I do practice that sort of thing and finding the self. Petite Writer is here. Oh, I love writers too. So that's a great name also, Petite Writer. Thanks for saying hello. If you're just joining us, let me know in the chat where you're from. If you have any questions, hit that thumbs up. And I highly recommend this book because it's refined my memory, my mind map. Sometimes I have a hard time distinguishing mind maps from memory palaces because I don't see that this is not a memory palace. It's just a memory palace in a different way. But it's refined my practice quite a bit, and I'm actually testing some new things that I wasn't doing before, and we'll see how that it helps. Because one of the things that Tony teaches in mind mapping is to limit things to single words. And on my previous mind maps, I've always gotten tired of sentences and so forth. And he's got reasons for it. The rules will set you free, and if you just submit yourself to the rules, which I find very difficult in many cases, I found it difficult when I was teaching myself memory techniques as well, and I had to create different rules because I was doing language learning. I was doing a PhD in like heavy duty philosophy and lots of terms in different languages, and also lots of book titles and knowing what are said in those books and so forth. And really, really, really important. So the magnetic memory method is for large learning projects, languages, and massive study projects and so forth. And I needed to create new rules, but I needed to also base on the old rules, and I needed to refine them. And that's what a magnetic memory palace is all about. And that's why it's different, is because it's about lots of knowledge and really, really understanding the spatial memory component, which we'll talk about in a second here. But it's submitting to rules. And so when I read Tony Buzan, I go back to the well, reread it, really think deeply about what he's trying to say here, and I submit to it. Yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge. It's a constraint, but so much of progress comes from understanding constraints, submitting to constraints, and then what ends up happening is you are able to create more because of the submission to the constraint. And so how does that make sense? Well, think of the sonnet, right? Sonnets have different rules. There's Petrarchian sonnets and there's Elizabethan sonnets and so forth. And they have different rules, but each rule, if you submit to the rule, this odd thing about using iambic pentameter and 14 lines, and having a sestet and a volta, and the AB structure, and however the rules are of sonnets. If you just submit to those rules, there's an infinity of potential expression, right? But it's not a sonnet if you don't, and you don't have that sonnet feel to it. So likewise with mind mapping, Buzan has some guidelines that create an infinity of expression that if you don't submit yourself to those guidelines, you don't get that kind of expression. So I'm refining my practice here and sharing it with you, and I don't really totally, in my mind, see the difference between mind maps and memory palaces. But I'm going to test new things because normally I have lots of words and so forth. But I decided to take Buzan's thing about having only words a step further, and in all cases here, just use individual letters. So that's like, sometimes you submit yourself to the rules and then you just crank them, tighten them up even tighter. So we'll see how that works. Petite Writers from Montreal. All right. Hello from Montreal, Canada. Thanks for... Oh, Julie's here. Hi, Julie from California. Got to answer an email from you here soon, but we'll do that. And let's get started with this now that you know a little bit more about what I'm doing with the mind mapping. Oh yeah, and the other thing too is that I wasn't using nearly as many pictures. So doing more pictures and so forth. And having a lot more fun, actually. It's a lot more fun. So the rules set you free, submit to the instructions, at least give them the good old college try, as we used to say, before colleges got weird. But in any case, any guesses as to what this structure is here? I'm curious. And by the way, if you're joining us live, keep coming. We've had a book suggestion. I want to know what memory books you've read, and I want to expand my own knowledge because I go out and read these things, and there's so many books that people just don't seem to know. So we're creating a mega list, and we're going to do a webinar at magneticmemorymethod.com/BK later this week. You've got time to get registered, to clear your calendar. No replay. And for those who attend, we're going to have a PDF with a mega list of all the titles that I've gathered from all the people, all that I know, and so forth. Sandra says, just registered. Awesome, Sandra. Thanks for that. And tally your time and get on in there because there's no replay and you got to make the time for memory improvement. If you want the knowledge, be serious about it and just show up and learn, and you'll get this PDF, this mega list of all the memory improvement books that I've gathered and courses and so forth, so you can see for yourself the wide range of potential options and the 5 most powerful books I'll be talking about. I'll be unlocking 5 secrets from them. So no guesses here from anybody about what this is, but it's the Parthenon anyway, and that's to represent ancient Greece. And it's sort of blocked off here, but I have a T and an S. And so a lot of people, when they tell the story of the origin of memory techniques, the memory palace in particular, they talk about Simonides, sometimes pronounced Simonides, and Simonides. You'll hear different pronunciations. Not sure what is correct or if we'll ever get to the bottom of the correctness of that. But who here knows the story of Simonides of Kos? Anybody know this? Let me know in the chat if you know this. And if you don't know this, say, no, I don't know, and I would like to know. Or say, no, I don't care, and I'm out of here. Because this is really, really important. If you understand the story of Simonides, there's so many ways to say it. If you understand that story, you will know so much about why memory techniques work. Julie says, yes, it's a good one. All right. And Sandra says, why did they ask me for my password after I asked for my Gmail? Is that necessary? Sandra, I don't know why you would be asked for a password. I tested it. There's no password whatsoever, so I'm not sure what you're doing. I apologize for that. I'll have to look into it. Anybody else have that experience? Let me know. If you have registered at magneticmemorymethod.com/BK, let me know. By the way, if you're watching the replay and the registration is closed, still follow that link. It'll take you to a free memory training nonetheless, but it just won't be live, and there won't be this PDF that I want to give you of the mega list of memory improvement books and courses. So sorry again, Sandra. I wish there's just interesting things that seem to happen on some people's computers, and I don't know why I can't anticipate them all. But there's this thing where the internet is consolidating to sameness, which would be great to streamline the same experience for everybody, but at the same time, in order to maintain intellectual rights and freedoms, we also need to have competition on the internet, and that just leads to a mess of different outcomes and experiences because there's so many different softwares and devices and configurations and so forth. Do Phoenix says, I don't know, but I would like to. Okay, so let's get into this. Now, I'm going to talk about T, which is teles, but first we want to talk about Simonides of Kos, or Simonides of Kos, or however you want to pronounce it. If you want to look it up and learn about ancient Greek pronunciation, that may give you some clues. I have come to like Simonides myself. Anyway, so who was Simonides of Kos? Well, he was a guy who was a poet, and he used to give speeches, and he was given a speech one time at a banquet. And the banquet was in a giant banquet hall, at least in my imagination. And apparently this story comes down to us from Cicero, by the way, although I think it's mentioned in a few different sources. And one of the ways that we think that this and that thing is real as opposed to just an invention has to do with the number of references that we have and independent sources. So I'm not sure how many independent sources there are for Simonides of Kos. I think it's the stuff of legend, but it's one of those great legends that tells us a lot about how to use memory techniques. So he's at this banquet, and he's given his speech, and he has an arrangement with the host of the banquet that he's going to get paid a certain amount of money. And by the way, if you've heard this story before, I'm going to tell it, I think, maybe a little bit different than other people tell it, but that's because, well, stories evolve. Memory changes. Every time you tell a memory, it changes. So there's many, many variations of this story, and I'm going to tell the way I like it the best. If you ever saw Lost Highway, I always love Lost Highway, where they're grilling the guy about the surveillance cameras, that he doesn't have security cameras in his house. And they're like, well, why don't you? And he's like, because I like to remember things the way I remember them, not necessarily the way they happened. I always like that one. Now, of course, in memory training, we want to remember things exactly correctly, right? But when we're telling stories, we must evolve our stories, because every time we tell a story, it actually changes chemical location in our brain. XM Hughes is here. Thanks for all the good work, says XMC Hughes. Thank you for saying hello. Thanks for being here. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, and let me know the most recent memory improvement book you read, so we can add it to the list. So Simonides, of course, has a deal. He's given a speech, and he's going to get paid a certain amount. And while he's giving his speech, he thanks Castor and Pollux, who are these like two god-like dudes, deity guys. And he then concludes his speech, and he goes to the arranger of the banquet, and he says, "All right, Mr. Banquet Arranger, time to pay up." And the banquet arranger says unto Simonides, "Hey man, you didn't thank me during your speech, but you thanked Castor and Pollux. So why don't you go and ask them for your fee?" So it's like this total situation of dramatic conflict. The banquet host's ego is so big that he thinks that because he wasn't thanked during the speech, that he shouldn't have to pay for this wonderful presentation given by Simonides of Kos. Well, I'm not sure exactly how Simonides reacted, but according to the legend as I have it in my mind, he doesn't have time to react because all of a sudden a messenger comes and says, "There are two dudes outside who have an urgent message for you. You got to come right now." And Simonides is like, "Whoa, okay, so let's go." And he like lets himself be led out of the banquet hall. And lo and behold, the two dudes who have a message for them are Castor and Pollux. And they're like, "Hey, Simonides, come on over here." And he's like, "Yeah, well, why don't you come on into this banquet? Because we're eating lots of food and there's lots of wine, and I might recite some more poetry, so maybe I can get my fee from the banquet guy because he owes me some money, and maybe if I thank him the second time, we can ease this out." And Castor and Pollux are like, "No, dudes, come on. Dude, you come on over here. Just come a little step closer because, our throats are a little bit dry and we can't talk too loud, so you got to come over to us. And our horses here are a little bit, they're a little bit nervous and they get afraid by large buildings." And so they finally get Simonides to come over to them, and they're like, "Simonides, good idea. Thank you for coming here because," bang. And then all of a sudden, the banquet hall crumbles to dust, destroying the lives of the banquet host and everyone inside the building, right? It just is completely demolished. And Castor and Pollux also proceed to say, "Yeah, that guy ripped you off. What a criminal. Here's all the money that he should have paid you. And by the way, some people are going to need your superior memory in a second. All that memory that you use is going to become a blessing for all humanity from this point forward." And then Castor and Pollux get on their deity horses and they fly off into the distance and disappear, right? And then Simonides is waiting there with this massive amount of coins. He's waiting and waiting, and the authorities show up and the families of the dead ones show up because they've heard this massive crash as the building imploded on itself, killing everyone inside. And they ask Simonides what happens. And he says, "Well, there was just a giant earthquake or something. I don't know what happened. The building just collapsed, and I had just come outside for a second, and I survived. I'm the sole survivor." And so as they were moving the rubble around to see if they could find any people that may have survived, the authorities said, "Well, you were there. Who are these people? So we can help the family members of these deceased recognize their lost loved ones and have a proper burial." And so Simonides, who used memory techniques, was able to name each and every single person, every body, because they had just been at their seats in the banquet hall, and he had just been addressing him, or them. And the only person that he really couldn't identify specifically was the banquet manager host, because that guy was off and about somewhere else, but he identified him by default. And well, this is not in the legend, but we can decide for ourselves whether or not Simonides of Kos remembered his name or not. But here's the thing, and this is really, really important about this, is that Simonides may have used memory techniques to remember each and every name, right? But using memory techniques to remember each and every name is not the memory palace. The memory palace is the fact that he knew where they were sitting. And he could identify them not only because he knew their name, but because he knew their location in space, right? Now, of course, you can get all fantastic and say, yeah, but this building collapsed and maybe a guy was thrown 50 meters or whatever. Well, this is the stuff of legend. But the point of the story that a lot of people miss when they hear the story is that it's not just about memory techniques as such, it's about location-based mnemonics. It's about the pairing, the weaving, you might say the magnetic coupling of general memory techniques with location-based mnemonics, or what I've come to think of as magnetic stations, because when you create these memory palaces very, very strategically, and you make sure they're well formed, and you actually create them in a way that helps your brain form them well, it really kind of manipulates the mental chemistry, the brain chemistry, in a way that makes them much easier to navigate and much easier to use, and to use again if you get to that level, which you can. You're making a very, very strong memory palace, one that is crisp and clean and sharp and will stand the test of time and will allow you to memorize massive amounts of information. So that's where in the Western world that idea comes from. However, it's much older than that. This is just a story, and that's the story of Simonides of Kos. Now, I think that emphasis on space precedes Simonides quite a lot. Now, this is speculation. By the way, do you like that story? Let me know in the chat. Is that an interesting story to you? Does that story in and of itself help you understand a little bit better about what a memory palace is and what mnemonics are about? And we're going to go in a little deeper into that story because it's fascinating. But let me know in the chat if you like that story, and if you're watching the replay, also put a post below and hit that thumbs up if you haven't already. Sandra says, this goes without question on the registration. Thank you. It is after it said, congratulations, you are registered. Then I click the button to receive a reminder. Well, if you want to receive a reminder, then yes, it may well, Sandra, ask you for your email. If you're just joining us, Sandra's referring to the free webinar at magneticmemorymethod.com/BK. And we're going to talk about the 5 memory improvement books no one seems to really be aware of, and the 5 secrets in them. And everyone who attends is going to get a massive PDF with a massive list of memory improvement resources, books and courses and so forth, many of which I'm sure you're unaware of, and it'll be like a little special catalog, that may or may not have existed before, and I've never seen anything quite like it. XMC Hughes says, happy to be here in Texas. Algorithms to Live by Christian and Griffiths, and yes, I memorized the chapters using a car-based visual support. Excellent. So Algorithms to Live by. Okay, we're going to add that to the list. Thank you, XMC Hughes, and thanks for mentioning Texas. There's so many great people from Texas that join these live streams, and I really like that. And sadly, one of you passed away recently, and it's just so sad. He was in the masterclass. He was in the mastermind, really active in some of the things that we do in the mastermind. I really miss him a lot. And yeah, so if you've been a regular on these live streams and you miss Alex Lane, sorry, but he passed away, but not in a memory palace, or not in a banquet hall that was crushed, because he was one of the good ones, and he did not turn down Simonides when Simonides gave his speech, but rather he was an active supporter of the memory improvement world, and he knew a lot about mnemonics beforehand as well, and he was a magician, and really miss him a lot. Sumit is here. Hello, Sumit. Thanks for saying hello. Dolphina says, I like it. XMC Hughes says, yes, it's an interesting story. Sandra, well, Sandra, I don't know. I'll have to go and look at that, but I don't see why you would need a password, but I'll go and test. For now, I'll check to make sure that you're properly registered, and we'll get that sorted out. Always Looking at Self says, what about having fuzzy visualization? My mind images are always fuzzy. Well, Always Looking at Self, have you taken the free magnetic memory method training? Have you gone through some of my podcasts? This is how you can solve that. Be constantly studying, always be studying these techniques. And a lot of these things that people feel like, excuse my reach for a second, I'm going to get some water here. All of these techniques, they get refined over time. And there's really... there's practice, for one thing, and then practicing well. And if you're posting what you're doing and how you're doing it, then I can help you authentically. General advice is often a little bit disingenuous because I don't know exactly what you're doing to create your images. I don't know whether they're magnetic or not. So that would be really, really important. Samit asks how to register. Go to magneticmarymethod.com/BK. You don't have to type it out. It should be appearing on your screen somewhere in the description below. And I know typing on mobile and so forth has gotten painfully difficult. I don't know how we're going to evolve this in the future, but if you have auto type or whatever, just leave the live stream temporarily and go magneticmarymethod.com/BK, and then however you enter your details so that you can be notified when the live stream takes place. Enter those and understand that you'll be notified because now people are getting sensitive about being emailed when they give their email address. I don't know why it's gotten to a hysterical moment in internet history, but yeah, we're going to send you a notification and a reminder, and we're going to support your memory in the best way that we can through the tools that we have. And one of those things that we do in magnetic memory method training is we urge you to take action. And in order to do that, we need to be in touch. And so the best ways to be in touch is still through email at the present moment. And we don't take it lightly ever that people trust this teaching that I do about memory, which is not just teaching about how to use your memory, but it's also teaching you to remove the tyranny of forgetfulness. And so we really appreciate it. But we do send emails, and so yeah, that's somehow should go without saying. But sometimes people say, how do I get unsubscribed? There's just always an unsubscribe button at the bottom. No big deal. No big deal at all. I don't know. I don't know how that has not been known to people, but I know that devices are changing. They get very confusing, and when just things on the internet just seem to change, and then everything's somewhere else than it used to be. I find that really annoying. So I understand when people find things annoying about the internet, but this is the world that we're in, and this is what we do. We use the tools that are available to serve people at the highest possible level, and just tell it like it is. The internet is going to help us get together if we're paying attention to the tools, and if we are interacting with them so that we can meet with real people in real time like we're doing now. And that's what this webinar is about. We're going to meet in real time, but there's no replay, so make sure you're registered and you're there. And I'm going to give you, if you're an attendee, this powerful resource, which I believe is the only thing of its kind on the internet. And there will be things there that aren't anywhere else, I'm sure of it. Well, thank you, XMC Hughes, for the super chat. That's awesome. And if you want to support this work with a super chat, that's awesome as well. Another thing, I never really talk about it that much, but if you want to support it also, you can always get some magnetic memory method swag. I don't drink out of this cup for myself, but I do keep my pencils in it and all my mind mapping tools and my scissors. And I hang my glasses there also. And you can go to magneticmarymethod.com/swag, SWAG, and that also helps support what we do in order to continue teaching in this way. And I'd love to see a picture with you if you have a magnetic Mary Method cup. They're pretty sweet. We have like one YouTube video where I showed you making coffee, which was a lot of fun to make. Because coffee is something I use a lot to keep myself sharp in a particular way with raw cacao. I was doing bulletproof coffee for a while, but that didn't quite pan out as a long-term strategy. Sandra says that the link works. Okay, thanks for confirming. And thanks again, XMC Hughes, for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Thumbs up to everybody. Thumbs up to XMC Hughes for that support. It really does make a difference to being able to keep free information flowing. And changes are coming to the internet, and it's quite shocking what some of those are. But we won't get on my high horse about about those matters now, because we did that previously on a live stream, and feeling a lot better about it actually, because I saw Dominic O'Brien give a talk, an interview, and he was really pointing out all the positives, which we still have, although some strange things are coming. But if you notice things are changing and they're changing faster and faster and faster, understand that there are corporate interests that are driving all this, and they are going to make it more and more corporate and more like network television, and the internet's going to be segmented. It looks like into regions, and there's going to be all kinds of taxes on every single little state that you access wherever you are. It's not the internet that we worked so hard to build. But anyway, enough of that. So we had the S here from Simonides. What's the T all about? You can't quite see the T, but I'll have to make a mental marker not to draw there on my mind palette, my mind maps here. XMC Hughes says, happy to, I love your work, and we all need to eat and drink coffee. This is true. And in my case, I need to eat memory food, memory-friendly food, and memory food that is also not going to cripple me with the arthritis that I have, which is something I've got in control over through the help of memory techniques, because I remember very well what I should eat and not eat. Okay, so this T, right? Well, I said that space, I think, was really on the minds of the ancient Greeks before Simonides of Kos, or Simonides of Kos, was doing his memory palace thing, if indeed he was doing it. I mean, it sounds like the stuff of legend to me. But what's really interesting about it is Thales said something really, really important. Now, if memory serves, it is Megaston topos habantagar kori. Megaston topos habantagar kori. Actually, just outside of this room, there's a magnetic station in my memory palace, which has Megatron from the no, I was going to say the Terminator, but that's the ugly sister effect in memory. You're looking for one thing when you need another, and instead of getting Prince Charming, which is the word you're looking for, you get something else. So I got the Terminator when I'm looking for Transformers. Anyway, I won't go through the whole thing, but Megaston topos habantagar kori. And that was a quote from Thales, who's considered the first philosopher, and he's considered the first scientist in the Western tradition, right? In that tradition. And what does that mean? Well, it's a very, very powerful statement. It means space is ultimate because it contains all things. And now, I don't have any evidence that Thales was into memory techniques or anything like that, but we know that generally a lot of the old ancient dudes had to train their memory, because even when there was writing, you couldn't refer to it as easily as you can today. So memory needed to be trained, and it was just part of rhetoric, it was part of philosophical thinking and so forth. And so I have to wonder to what extent he might have used location-based mnemonics, right? And so this is what this next stuff is all about here, is because location-based mnemonics is much older than Simonides of Kos. It's much older than that. And the tradition is powerful. And we can learn so much from learning about this beautiful tradition of memory techniques. But this idea from Thales that space is ultimate because it contains all things, Megaston topos habantagar kori, is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And when you understand that, I think you understand a lot, because the brain itself is space. It's chemicals in space. And in a book by Stephen Kosslyn called The Case for Mental Imagery, he talks about how there's kind of like this one-to-one correspondence between the external world and how the brain encodes information in chemical space, and then how that information moves throughout time. And we call this consolidation, right? Like, we know that we need to sleep to consolidate our memories. Although there's new research coming out that shows that as we age, sleep consolidation doesn't seem to play nearly as much a role as it does for younger people, which may support the idea that younger people need more sleep when they're going to school, which is probably why my school years were so disastrous, because they kept getting us up so early in the morning. And, my dad had a lot of drunken parties in the middle of the night, and so I just didn't sleep a lot in high school, which may be why I ended up dropping out at a certain point. But got back, somehow got a PhD nonetheless. So if you're having troubles in school and sleep is part of it, well, there's still hope. You'll get through it. I am sure you'll find a way, but to think about sleep and your age and consolidation. But in any case, the case for mental imagery is really, really important in that regard, because it demonstrates to us how and why information that is encoded in the brain is mapped onto, in an almost one-to-one correspondence, his research suggests, in ways that are really, really interesting and powerful. So What does that mean? Well, it's a demonstration, an explanation of why location-based mnemonics work so well, and why that they must work for all people if you can just find your way in, right? And there's multiple ways in. That's why I always share very, very much about all these different books. Like, read lots of books. That's why I always say one is the most dangerous number. Because if you're not understanding it from me, then if you read another book, then you're much more likely to kick your foot through the door of understanding and then get that ray of light. And then you move the door open and the ray of light comes in more and more, and it erases the ignorance of how this can work for you because you see it from another angle. And eventually you'll get it if you just persist, right? Because it may be that you get it from the first teacher you hear it from. It may be that you get it from the 10th teacher you hear from it. But if it's not connecting in your mind, then just keep reading the tradition, keep reading the different people, keep listening, keep coming at it, because you can get it. You must. And if you don't believe me, read Stephen Koslin's The Case for Mental Imagery, because it's how your brain works anyway. It's just, are you going to make the shift, right, to using memory techniques that in a way that supports almost like a paradigm shift from just passively maybe remembering stuff to actively engaging in the process based on how your brain works, knowing your learning hierarchies, knowing your sensory preferences, knowing what I call the magnetic modes, which we teach many times at magneticmemorymethod.com, and finding yourself in the mix. Because it's not one size fits all, it's how do you find yourself in the mix, right? And it must work for you. It has to work for you because you're understanding the words that I'm saying, because your memory is a miracle. Your memory is already the best memory in the world. It's just if it's not giving you the outcomes that you want, you're just not using it in order to produce those outcomes, and you might need to shift it a little bit here and there. That's why we call it the magnetic memory method, not the magnetic memory methods or system and all these other guys, just this system and that system. There's no system except for the system you create for yourself based on a true, deep understanding of the real knowledge, not just what sounds good or, you can put on a Facebook ad and get all kinds of clicks and so forth. That's just not going to work. Somehow we are paused here. What is going on? Sorry. What happened if I did this? Oh, are we back? Somehow my screen is frozen. Can someone let me know in the chat if we're actually live or not? I'm not sure what's going on, but I apologize for this. I wonder if it has a. Oh, it's frozen. Are you able to hear me, Carlos? That's the question that I would have. Julie's is frozen. Oh, well, I'm moving again. I can see myself again. I'm not sure what that would be, but hopefully we're back on. Apologies for that. So Julie says yes. Carlos says you're back. Great, excellent. And Carlos had asked, what subject is my PhD in? Julie says, just registered for the webinar. Do Phoenix registered for the webinar? Sweet, it's done registering for the webinar. Great. In case you're just joining us and you haven't, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/BK, which is for book. We're going to talk about the 5 memory improvement books that no one seems to be mentioning on the recent survey that I did, and the 5 secrets that have helped me the most from each of those books. And then everyone who attends is going to get this PDF with a massive list of all the things that I know from years of study, books and resources. Many of them are free. But if you don't know, well, then you can't get them. Anyway, I was talking about Stephen Koslin, how that you can learn the magnetic modes and so forth and find yourself in the mix before we got frozen there. Sorry for the inconvenience. Not sure what the internet was up to there, but maybe they heard me talking about rights and freedoms. I don't know. And they said, well, we better pause this guy. Send him a lesson. But yeah, we're going to carry on here. But does all that make sense? Does it make sense that if you want to learn something and something's not clicking in the mind, that you really just need to continue studying something, right? Let me know in the chat if that makes sense to you, and I'll answer Carlos's question about my PhD, because here's the thing about my PhD. There's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't understand right away, and I had to read and read and read and read, and your perspective keeps opening. And when you get a foot in the door, you just keep pushing the door, and the light comes in. Same thing with learning a language, right? Like, I'll never forget the day that I learned Zerbrechlich in German, and then I was all of a sudden that word is everywhere, and it literally felt like the door of German had opened up and the light was shining through. And then I just kept opening it and opening it, word for word for word. It's just like more light shines through, and your ignorance of the language is diminished and your knowledge of it increases. And then you can do more because of that increase in knowledge. And it can be on a word by word basis. The problem is that we've been trained to be impatient and to want it all now. And we don't see the value in these small little wins, word by word by word, or phrase by phrase by phrase. I just quoted something, right, from ancient Greek, from Thales, and I had to memorize it word by word by word. And I had to memorize the Greek, and I had to memorize the meaning in English. And it opened up so much knowledge because I was able to connect it with reading Stephen Kosslyn, right? And then that connects to another thing, and it connects to another thing, and it just opens up your perspective. It opens up your knowledge. So really, just memorizing anything is the path to memorizing more stuff. Does that make sense? So anyway, that's our first thing here, the Greek tradition. And I find it really, really, really powerful to know as much as you can about that particular arm of the world. By the way, this here, something Zen teaches is to have a central image. And in this case, our central image is a book. And so what I was thinking here, working clockwise, is, what are the things that come to mind when I think about memory improvement books? And the next thing that comes to mind here, this is meant to represent the Buddha. The Buddha. And why? Why? Well, one of the things that's so obvious to me, and it's obvious to me because of, making all these explorations. Oh yes, I was going to answer my thing about my dissertation for Carlos. Sorry, let's do that. But it relates to this, actually. So my dissertation was on friendship, and my PhD was in humanities at York University. And basically humanities means the history of religion, the history of science and technology, and the history of language, particularly the classical world. So, you had a lot to cover, and you needed to really dive deep into all those things. And I did some amazing courses with some amazing professors, and I had to read a lot in order to make the connections. And one of the values that I learned was to oh, we're running out of battery here. Let's take a little pause. I'll keep talking, and I'll just plug in my battery because I missed the connection of putting in my battery so we wouldn't run out. But I'll keep talking about my PhD, and we'll get back to Buddha and memory here in a second. But yeah, so I just did my PhD, and it was pretty awesome to read all this stuff in the tradition. But I had to cover a lot, and it was tons and tons and tons. Oh, and tons and tons and tons. You guys would not believe what a crazy studio setup I have here. I have to squeeze down and go around and get in your face, and tattoos everywhere. I'm like the Henry Rollins of memory training here. But I had to read so much stuff. I had to read and read and read and understand. When you're doing your PhD and you're gonna read, it's like a Hydra effect. That's probably why we had that pause before, is that the battery ran out. Julie says it's so great to watch you live. Yeah, total chaos, but thank you for saying that, Julie. Peter's here from Japan. But what I wanted to say, and this is what's so important, and thank you guys for your patience there. I should have had that plugged in, I hope. I hope it actually did plug in. It should have. When you read the Nicomachean Ethics from Aristotle, for example, well, you don't just get to read the Nicomachean Ethics from Aristotle. You got to plan to read at least two books about Aristotle and one other book by Aristotle, right? Because you're never going to understand anything really about the book other than just what it says on the page. And when you're doing higher forms of knowledge, and I would just argue pedestrian forms of knowledge, it doesn't really amount to much. You don't have historical context, you don't have commentary by other thinkers, You don't even have it in the context of the author, him or herself, right? So it's really, really important to think of all reading as a hydra, right? Cut off the dragon's head and at least two more heads come out, at least two more. And so, one of the things that I had with my reading was exactly that is, and it's part of what's called magnetic Mary method bibliomancy, which is how you read books is you deliberately cause a hydra effect. Every book must make two more books out of it, or at least two more articles. You somehow embed it in at least two more, right? In order to open your perspective, open your mind, make sure you've really engaged in it. Same thing with like movies and stuff. So never really satisfied to watch a movie by a director and only that movie. It's not really understanding that art, that piece of art. It's not really understanding its significance or whatnot. And you can just, yes, there's kind of an infinity of possibilities there, but that's where you develop a tool that is part of the memory tradition, which has different words and so forth, and we'll get to it in this area here. But it's discernment, basically, and making decision parameters, having decision parameters, refining your decision parameters over time so that you're able to discern what you want to read and what you don't want to read. And it's a skill, and you can make mistakes. It can actually become so sharp that you're illegitimately saying, oh, well, I'm not going to read that. And that could be the biggest mistake in the world, right? Because discernment can be too sharp, right? And so never be too sure, never be too sure. Always have an open mind, an open eye to certain things, but also read inside the classics. Know what a classic is. So Frank Kermode has a book called The Classic. I'd highly recommend it to anyone because it'll help you develop discernment over your reading. Because what counts as a classic may surprise you when he opens up your mind about what that might be. In any case, why I think of that is because I gave a course as a university professor, because part of my research had to do with adaptation, the adaptation of texts through time, through media, right? And my dissertation ultimately on friendship was about that as well, with respect to how friendship has been adapted through time and the values and the virtues of friendship have changed as they've been adapted through time and through media, right? So how we engage in friendship is very different now than it was when the internet was, YouTube was a small thing and everybody was watching Friends on DVD reruns, or they were watching Friends as it was being broadcast live, as it was when, say, the 70s, or as it was in the 1700s and so forth. What friendship has a sort of historical construct. It's influenced by the historical moment. So, always looking at self as fascinating. Well, thank you. And it is fascinating. And I often think about revisiting friendship. But part of why I do the work that I do is deeply influenced by everything I learned about friendship and all of the ways that I thought about friendship. And I did a second MA while I was doing my PhD in media and communications philosophy and theory. And that really made me attuned to the things coming on the internet, always thinking about it and thinking about how it connects to learning, how friendship connects to learning, how everything weaves together. So thank you for that question about my PhD and my dissertation and so forth. I don't really recommend reading my dissertation because it's really weird and it's not very readable because I didn't know how to write the way that I know how to write now, but I'm pretty sure it's there somewhere on the internet. And I talked about a very extreme form of friendship to illustrate what the principle of what I called hypothetical consent, which is a philosophical tautology, which says that, what a tautology is? It's like circular reasoning. So one of the ways I used to explain to students this circular reasoning was to use Tigger, right? The wonderful thing about Tiggers is Tiggers are wonderful things, right? Well, that's just a circular argument, right? Because Tiggers are wonderful things, they are Tiggers, and because Tiggers are Tiggers, they are wonderful things, right? Well, in friendship, we have this, but we have it with what's called what I came to call hypothetical consent, which is this tautological circle in which, because you are my friend, I assume that I can say and do certain things. And because I can say and do certain things, I make assumptions about you as my friend, right? So it's a circular argument. And we see this throughout history and throughout media changing. And so it's very interesting, the appropriateness of what can be done and what cannot be done. And it affects our memory. Friendship affects our memory. So much of what we have in life is our relationships and our memory of the relationships, and how those two things woven together create the quality of our life moving forward. And back to Stephen Kosslin and the case for mental imagery and all that one-to-one correspondence stuff, um, we have in all of that the spatial representation, the spatial hosting of our friends in our brain chemistry. So that's one of the reasons why I really love always looking at self's name, always looking at self, right? Is because whenever you're looking at your friend, you are looking at yourself. You must be looking at yourself, because where is your friend? Your friend is, yes, there's a person there, but where is your friend really? Your friend is in your brain chemistry, right? This, whatever it is a real thing that's sending signals that are encoded in your brain chemistry. And your perception of that thing not only is out of sync with time, because this processing happens after facts, after actual stimulus, but it's also changing brain position, and it's moving around and stored in different places in the chemistry. And so things that you'll remember about a friend may be true or untrue, but they will always be represented in chemicals, right? So the truth of things is very, very contingent, very shapeable, and your memory changes every time that you recall a memory. So you know that thing where you're telling stories to your friends, and your friends are like, no, that's not the way it happened, right? And you're like, no, but it did. You just completely remember the same thing differently. And you may remember, your feelings about friends may change. And then when you look back at a friendship, you may say, yeah, well, it wasn't really all that good after all, even though maybe it was. But it's all happening here. And that person there is quite independent of this reality. Anyway, I find all that stuff fascinating. And memory wasn't totally on my mind when I did a friendship, but I was very concerned with how that the brain and media are information storage and retrieval devices as such, not to machinify organic humans, but nonetheless we share that with computers. I don't like computer brain metaphors, but we share the fact with computers that our brains store information in space, and that space is electrochemical, right? We just do it very differently than computers. We don't consolidate, we don't defrag in any sort of way like this. And computers don't tend to change information every time you recall it, and they don't tend to change position in quite the same way. But what you can do when you learn memory techniques is you can get much more involved in the position of the chemical storage of information by grabbing it in particular ways and encoding it using mnemonics. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And you can do the same thing with people that you meet and friends. So you harbor ill with your friend or whatever. Well, forgiveness is the process of reshaping memory, right? And just meeting people in the first place, you can already hit the ground running and have much more positive experiences by how you encode them in your brain. And you just shape everything. It's just brilliant and fascinating and wonderful. Peace says, great topic. Oh, nice. So thank you for saying that. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world. We're having a webinar later this week at magneticmemorymethod.com/BK. If you look through the chat history there, a bunch of people have already signed up, and we had a nice super chat, and I really, really appreciate that. And it's an amazing thing that we're able to do this, and I appreciate your support. XMC Hughes, really wonderful for doing that, and if you want to support in that way, that's great. And we're talking about memory improvement books, and this webinar is the 5 memory improvement books no one seems to have been mentioning in my recent survey, and the 5 secrets that I learned from them. And everybody who attends gets a big old PDF that's going to really give you the ultimate list that I've ever seen on the internet of all the books there. Now, I don't want you to think there's going to be thousands of entries, but it's going to be pretty substantial, and not in that way where people are like, where's the meat? Because remember, meat stands for MEAT, meaningless education, absurdly thriving. No, this is just knowledge that you can use. No meat, just knowledge. So Jeff says, my friends always seem to show up in my dreams, so that seems to be connected. Yeah, Jeff, that is interesting, an interesting thing that happens. And dreams are very fascinating. I don't know if you saw a recent video I released on this channel about dreams. My friend Stefan and I from How to Lucid, we recently did a thing together about dreams and memory. And dreaming is so important to memory, and I have a course on how to remember your dreams. And one of the reasons why that I put that course together is because I spent many years with dream recall. Forget about lucid dreaming. Not interested in it. I'm just, right or wrong, I'm just not even remotely interested in lucid dreaming, even though it does happen to me. I'm more interested in extending dream recall so I can practice my memory while I'm sleeping, practice it when I wake up, and then derive certain interesting creative tools, right? Because a lot of people, and this goes back to, the fuzzy image thing, is that a lot of people just aren't using their minds as much as they could. And when you practice magnetic dream recall, then you have so many more mnemonic tools to use, right? So it's really important to get into dream recall as soon as you can. And even if you're just like, oh, I'm just not interested in that and I can't make the connection between the two, trust me, just believe me, I wouldn't send you down that path if it wasn't good for you, and you don't have to take my word for it. It's just logical, right? Your dreams are creating information. If you're forgetting the information, you're losing information. And if you're not using that ability to remember more dreams, which is well known, well documented in science, is not anything outlandish, but if you're not using that tool, you're missing out on a huge amount of brain exercise, which means that you're missing out on a huge amount of brain fitness, which means that you're missing out on a huge amount of memory exercise. And so that's just the basics, right? And you can use memory palaces to help you remember your dreams, and you can use all kinds of things. And then you can ask yourself certain questions about the things that you dream, which connect to the Magnetic Memory Method Life Grid, which is a very important tool to use and to understand and to use frequently, which we're going to talk about on this webinar. And it's very important to learn these tools and to use them. And not using dreams to exercise your memory is a huge loss. It's a huge loss for all people. Might not be for everyone, but consider doing it because it's very powerful. And what is this other than dreaming on paper, right? It's just the difference between waking life and sleeping life. When you really get into it, when you really start to explore it, you'll be amazed and surprised by what happens to you. And that's not woo-woo or anything like that, but we're so lost in fantasy so much of the day, and we're lost in fantasies in ways that aren't increasing our knowledge and that isn't exercising our brain, that you may as well be dreaming, right? So dreaming, magnetic dream recall is a way of recapturing not just what happens at night, but also what happens in the day, because you'll start to have discernment and you'll be like, I'm in fantasy while I'm awake. Mind blown. And then you start to live differently, and it's really powerful. And then this, of course, is also quite related to dreaming. So Jeff says, Stefan is actually how I found you. Oh, well, that's great. Yeah, it works. You do things with other people on the internet, and bang presto, you get to reach more people. That's awesome. So thank you for letting me know that. Appreciate it. Now, Buddha. What's this Buddha stuff all about? Well, maybe not Buddha as such, although Buddha is a very powerful magnetic bridging figure. If you want to use him, look at some images of him and so forth. And I got a cross besides Buddha. I guess you can't see that light blue. I might maybe not use that light blue anymore, or figure out the lighting better here, but there's a little drawing of Buddha and a cross. This is related to spatial memory, maybe not Buddha as such, but early on in the yogic traditions, it was taught to do these meditations where you would remember certain things in certain orders, and you would use the temples to help you remember what to do in the meditation, what to concentrate on, what to recite, and so forth. So I was taught a meditation. That's where I first made the link between Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist by any stretch of the imagination, but I did study it a lot over the years just to see what's going on there. But I made the link because I was taught a meditation, and the guy was just like, look, if you're having a hard time remembering this image of crossing a bridge and all your friends are shooting arrows at you, which had a certain purpose, well, then just stick it over there in that corner of this temple, all right? And if you're having issues with remembering the dog biting at your ankles, which is to remind you that death is always at your heels and that you should just be enlightened right now because now's the only time that exists anyway and death will get you, then just see yourself over there and this dog's biting at your heels and you'll remember that part of the meditation. So, what is that other than location based mnemonics? Memory palace, right? Really, really powerful. So that's there. And then I have a cross here to represent the stations of the cross in the Catholic tradition. And other churches, of course, use space for the purpose of memory as well to help the people remember this stuff. Now, we don't have literacy of paintings the way that we used to, but there are some arguments that I've read in art history, because I did a lot of art history as well in my day, and I even taught for the art history department at the Universität des Saarlandes in Saarland in Germany. And you'd look at these paintings, and there's a certain literacy of where things are in the paintings, and even the placement of, say, Christ in a painting and so forth, and the Pieta and all that stuff. Like there's location there as well to help you remember certain concepts. So that may be lost, but it's really, really important. If you're just joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world. We've had some great suggestions from people so far of memory improvement books that they've read. Peter, hi Peter, says, I read The Memory Code by Lynn Kelly. Excellent and amazing how it was used in some cultures. And yeah, well, this here is a didgeridoo to remind me of Lynn Kelly and The Memory Code. So I'm glad that you mentioned it, Peter. Thanks for that. And keep those chats coming. If you have any questions about memory and so forth, keep them coming. But yeah, why though? Why this? Well, this is actually older than these things, but when you're making your ideas and so forth, you don't have to do it in a linear fashion, right? You can portion them out. You can portion them out in any which way that they come. But I just work in a clock-like fashion, and trying to learn the rules, submit myself to the rules to get better. I think this is probably my best mind map that I've ever done, quite frankly. So thank you, Mr. Bizan, for your guidance, and really appreciate the new book, Mind Map Mastery. So go and get that if you haven't already. A full review is coming out on Magnetic Memory Method podcast and the blog as soon as possible. But I really want to, before I do reviews of books and stuff, like I actually try them and spend some time with them so that when I speak to you about it, like there's some substance to it. And here is warming up, and I'm, just on the surface about warming up here. So I don't think I've refined my practice, and here's a hint, you just keep practicing. You just get better and better. But I'm submitting to the rules a lot more. So the DIG represents the memory code, but why? Why? Well, there's a couple of ways that location-based mnemonics are so important in that book and in the survival of the human species that Lynn is talking about. So one of those ways is using song lines to, remember passage through terrain that needed to be moved through and to be safe about that passage. Another one is passing along knowledge about plants that could be eaten safely, like during a drought, for example, or just plants that could be eaten safely any old time. And then plants that were used medicinally for existential diseases that just pop up out of nowhere, like with no rhyme or reason to them, but you needed to know. So there's a deep survival advantage to memory techniques, but particularly location-based mnemonics, because needing to remember what plant will help what condition is only so good if you can remember where to get the plant, right? So they used knowledge in a way that combines space and the actual practical knowledge of application and so forth, which is really, really important to our ability to survive, And we still use it to this day in many, many ways, although we may not do it mnemonically. So as an example, if you're in the pharmacy, now I don't know exactly how pharmacies do this, but I've observed that what they do is they have codes, maybe not memory codes, but they have codes for storing the different substances throughout the pharmacy, and the computer tells them, well, this is aisle 6, shelf B, and maybe the shelf is segmented in a certain way so that they're able to go to the location in the pharmacy, grab the substance, and then they go to the second substance, and then they take it to a place, and they mix it together, pour it into your pills, and away you go, right? Well, Well, that's location-based knowledge. It's just that they're not memorizing it mnemonically, although a lot of them email me asking for help because they want to get faster and know more. So how would you do that? Well, if it's aisle 6 and you've got, shelf B, let's say it's shelf B segment 3, well, you can use the major method to help you. You can make a memory palace. Like, it would be like a reverse memory palace in a way. The stuff is already there, but you're now figuring out a path and a journey. And then you could just use the names of the chemicals themselves, memorize all those names, and then using the major method and having numbered the locations, find your way back to them. That's how I would go about that. XMC Hughes says, question, what about using a series of stories to symbolically build foundational subjects or mental models? Any suggestion on work related to this? I guess I just need to know a bit more about what you mean by series of stories. And what kinds of information we are talking about. And as I wait for clarification, what I would say is that a lot of people, they talk about mind movies. Like, I read lots and lots of emails from people and they say my little mind movies aren't working. And they're not movies. They're not stories. At most, they're vignettes, right? So imagine, and without knowing exactly what you're getting at, I would think that having complete long narratives places too much burden on memory, whereas crisp, short little vignettes that are not thought of as movies but rather plays, and the memory palace as the stage upon which the plays are enacted, and you are the theater director, is much better, and segmenting and focusing on little bits of information at a time. And the reason why I would just generally think of that is because we know of the power of taking pauses between things. But the longer you stretch out the encoding process and the more detailed and elaborate that it gets, then the greater the burden on the memory. Now, it depends on the nature of the information, though. Everything depends on the nature of the information, and this is what magnetic memory method urges you to do and teaches you how to do, is identify it on a topic-by-topic basis, think about it for that topic, and don't generalize, because there's not a one-size-fits-all for all things, but rather there is the preparedness to deal with all things when presented with them. And if there are universal principles to follow, it would be segmentation rather than extension. But there's always exceptions to the rule. And it's very, very important to understand the role of exceptionality in learning. And that's one of the things that gets people stuck, is that they don't know about exceptionality. Another thing that gets people stuck is that they are deeply unaware of the importance of redundancy. And we're being trained to get answers to our questions in 6 seconds or less, or 2 seconds or less, and we're gone, when actually information requires space. So it's like the 80-20 rule really plays. You're only, in any given message, you need the 100% to perceive the 20% of what you need, and the 80% is the context in which the 20% is meaningful, right? It's the same thing with a memory palace, right? So if you have a memory palace, about 80% of the space is just going to be space as such. But with the magnetic memory method, what we're trying to help you do is actually remove all of the unnecessary redundancy of space, so you're just focusing on the magnetic stations. That's why they're not method of Loki, okay? Because method of Loki is journey, and magnetic journey is shouldn't even use that word at all, because there's no magnetic journey. If it's a journey, it's already not the magnetic memory method. It's just that way, because we're talking about constellations. We're talking about through space that has been properly segmented relative to the information. Preparation and predetermination are very, very important principles to doing this. When I have the students email me of magnetic memory method, the course participants, and they say, wow, I just did this amazing stuff, and it's because they followed that recommendation, not any other way. And when they struggle, it's because they're not following that recommendation. And it's just a matter of finding out how you can get yourself to do that relative to your information. And then you use recall, rehearsal, and bang presto. It's really fast. And of course, you have to factor in your level of practice. There's no getting around that. XMC Hughes says, my thought is to make a system of stories to teach people, my children, things like combinatorics or grammar. Young minds seem to really navigate to stories, at least mine do. Oh, yeah, okay, well, that's another factor, right? Age and the information as such. So if I had kids, which I don't, so I feel a little bit cautious about giving any recommendations to kids, although I have had consulting clients who wanted to talk about this, and so we gave them some recommendations. And what really worked is not so much story, but still like longer term story with segmentation in mind. So, for example, 2 times 2 is 4, right? If a kid is struggling with that, well, then you get 2 pairs of shoes by the door, right? And then you make those shoes somehow maybe in, like, do they have 2 aunts, right? Instead of 3 uncles or 3 aunts. But, you just find in their own life things that they know that come in pairs. Maybe Noah gets involved because he took the animals on the ark in pairs, right? So Noah has 2 pairs of shoes that are by the door. So 2 times 2 is 4, right? 3 times 3 is 6. So now you go to another part of the memory palace and you have some sticks, right? And then, but which sticks, right? Well, it's the sticks that we gather with grandma every fall because we're doing the yard cleanup together as a family, right? Not just some abstract sticks. That's not going to stick in the mind. Real sticks, right? And it might be hockey sticks because the kids play hockey, or the father in the family is a real hockey fan and the kids know that he's a real hockey fan, so that it's real in the mind. And not just real in the mind, but it's already in the mind. That's the thing. And this is one of the biggest problems that people with mnemonics have, is they're always trying to reinvent the wheel instead of working with what's already in the mind. Because remember, and this goes back to what we were talking about with friendship and all that stuff, is that everything is in your mind, right? And the more that you just work with what's in your mind already, instead of trying to build things from scratch, and you just use it strategically, the better the results are going to be. Because you're not working. You don't have to work if you work with concrete things that already exist in the chemical framework of your existing memory, right? So to make that more concrete, if that's not already concrete, imagine you want to get fit, right? You want to build some muscle, but you don't have a gym nearby and you don't have whatever you need to get to the gym, right? Well, what do you have in your home that you could lift, right? I'll bet you have jugs that you could fill with water. And so you just get started with what you got, right? But you don't not build because you don't have access to the tools, right? And you don't necessarily go and buy an entire gym set that you bring into your home, right? You don't have to do elaborate things. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just use whatever's there. And then if you want to get more elaborate, well, then you can get more elaborate, right? You can go and get a gym membership. You can go get a coach. You can do all that stuff. But you've got something you can lift at home, period. Whether it's a book, whether it's a rock out in the garden, be careful. Don't hurt yourself, but there's something you can lift in order to start building some muscle. Same thing with memory, but even more so, because you've got so many things. Like if you just sat down with a piece of paper and wrote down every band that you like, or every cartoon character or whatever, right? You've just got so many tools to use like that. Not entire stories, but just tools to use in these fragmented vignettes. So Julie says constellations. I like it. Yeah, well, that's the way I think of it. And that actually came out of me in a conversation with Nelson Dellis. I just sort of like spontaneously put it out there because I was trying to get at something that I think a lot of people don't understand, is that they think this takes a lot of time and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't. In fact, there is no time, right? And I was always just like, why is this so fast for me? And it just comes down to that there is no journey. It's just a proper creation of the memory palace so that you know it inside and out from the get-go. And you don't have to see yourself walking from station to station. There's no time to be spent. And memory competitors know this very well because there's no time. If you're going to memorize a deck in 17 seconds, you're not sitting there going, okay, so Queen of Clubs, now I walk over to... No, you don't. It's just bang, 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 bang. And you can build up to that. And then the issue is, and it's sort of over here on our mind map today, but the issue is that we've got we've got to be able to see this outside of the memory competitions. The competitions are so inspiring. They give us so many tools to work with, but they don't map exactly onto real life applications for knowledge. And that makes it difficult for some people to see. But if you can get the constellation thing going for you, which you can, but you need to just create memory palaces intelligently and understand all the modes and all that jazz and just be in the practice. You'll get it. You'll get it. It's everybody can. Everybody already does it. That's the miracle of memory is that it's not as if you're not already doing it. You're just not doing it this way. So that's really important. So XMC Hugh says, thank you. I hope that helped. And by the way, I don't pretend to be the be-all and end-all of this, which is why we're having this webinar about other books that you can read. This is something where you must continue to read. If you really want to unlock your intelligence of this tradition, you need multiple perspectives. So magneticmemorymethod.com/BK, that's our webinar we're holding this week. You got time to clear your calendar and get registered. 5 memory improvement books. No one has mentioned at all in my surveys. Substantial amounts of people answered, and these books never came up for some reason, and yet they're the most powerful. And I'm going to pack 1 secret from each, which leads to 5 secrets, and then give you a PDF of all the titles that we've assembled, and courses as well, and resources that you're going to find very, very powerful. And this is easily worth $97 if you're serious about memory improvement, this PDF, because it will free you from scratching around, searching all over the place. Yeah, you'll still want to search, of course, for stuff on the internet. That's fine. But it'll save you a lot of time because you just look at a glance through these pages and be like, oh, that looks good, and you can go and get it. So that's really a boon for you if you show up. But it's only for people on the webinar at magneticmemorymethod.com/BK, which is, a little abbreviation for book. And yeah, there's no replay, so make sure that you save some time for the call and show up. And if you can't show up, then maybe the next time. Thanks for being here. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, and if you have any questions. So we've got the Greek stuff, we got some Buddha stuff, we got some Catholic stuff here. We got the didgeridoo to represent some prehistoric and deep Aboriginal things, and other so-called primitive people, although I don't think they were primitive at all, and that's one of the things Lynn Kelly is so good at helping draw our attention to. They had extremely sophisticated ways of producing, gathering, structuring, remembering, and then disseminating and teaching knowledge. Very, very sophisticated. In some ways, even more sophisticated than what we have today, even with all our bells and whistles. Although I'm a little primitive myself here with my little easel and my paper and my colors, So we still have room for the urban primitive in our modern times. What's this all about? Well, I'm trying to, in my way, represent a guy being burned at the stake. Anybody here can guess who was burned at the stake involved in the memory tradition? Let me know in the chat if you're able to name that guy. Julie sends us a smile. Thank you, Julie. Thanks for being here. Always great to see you and to have you part of this community, and your enthusiasm and interest is so much appreciated. It's really wonderful. XMC Hughes. Yes, Bruno, that's exactly right. It is Bruno, Giordano Bruno. So if you don't know, I have had a wonderful interview with Scott Gosnell, who translated Bruno, on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. He and I are actually meeting tomorrow for a chat to catch up. Really excited to meet with him. But we've also got an R and an L, and then an L and a Y and a C. Because these are the things that came to mind. And so one of the things that is really interesting to me about Bruno, Julie says, I'm holding the gold book right now, right, which is the new translation, which is absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And if you've read the introduction, then probably the R and the L jump out at you as something that you're aware of. But yeah, not that much is known to me about Bruno. I mean, I've read lots, but I still don't really feel like I just don't know the guy enough, you know. And a book of his is, of course, missing to us. We can only guess what's in there. But I really like the idea of Bruno a lot, and it's just it's just interesting. Like we're speaking about survival here, like the things that dude had to do to survive, really really interesting. And I don't know what to think of it all. There's just a lifetime, and many people have spent their lives pondering Bruno and his ideas and so forth. And there's just so many of them and so many implications, and it connects back to space because he was all about the the infinite, right? And well, there's so much to be said, and we're working on saying more about it. Sandra says, "Thank you once again for giving me so much to think about." Well, thank you, Sandra, and please do let me know what comes out of the things that you think about and what it was that you thought. I'd really appreciate to know what grows out of these things. I know, I mean, I hear from people every day, all day, and I just love the volume of email. I love engaging with it, and it's just a really privileged and beautiful thing to do for a life. And I hope I spend my life doing this. And with your support, of course, we will, and continue to teach this wonderful tradition. Always looking at self, says Bruno who? Giordano Bruno. And XMC Hughes says, Julie, the gold book, please enlighten. I didn't have it to hand, but excuse me for a second, and I will go get it. It's right here. And it's well worth a little bit of shout out because it's so incredible. So this is On the Shadows of the Ideas. John Michael Greer translated a new version, and it's gold. Very, very powerful book. This book is a must read if you care about your memory. And you know, we just really didn't have until now, to my knowledge. There is one that does okay, but we didn't have something that really took some time and made it beautiful, really took that care in there. Now, a lot of people, they want to use Bruno's memory system, but it's not. Well, we'll get into it, but we'll get into it in the future. But it's got, you know, lists, and it's really just beautifully laid out. And I don't know if there are copies left because it was a limited edition, but I jumped on it right away. And I know that a lot of people who follow Magnetic Memory Method jumped on it as well because they understand that this is a must-have. You must get it. So, On the Shadows of the Ideas. Yeah, so you need to read this, okay? It is such a beautiful, beautiful book, but it hasn't received a treatment like this before, and it's just so clearly translated. And if you ever struggled to understand Bruno, then this is going to help. And it places it in context and gives you books to read. Other books, because it follows the Hydra principle very well. So definitely get that. And speaking of books, we're going to talk about 5 books and 5 secrets at magneticmemorymethod.com/BK. That link should be down below. So register up for that webinar, make time for it, and I look forward to seeing you there. So Bruno, and then so we've got Ramus and Louis, and also it's a little bit of a stretch of the imagination a little bit, but I was thinking about this philosopher named Lyotard, and some of the things that he says about genre and why genre exists, why classifications of information exist, which is what Ramus and Louis are all about. And I've never really yet learned. People yell at me for different pronunciations, but in any case, who cares at this particular juncture? The point is that these guys were very, very deeply invested in creating what has become the structure of books, textbooks. Why they have indexes, why they have chapters, why they have tables of contents, and so forth. It was the organization of knowledge, kind of in the way that, you know, Google structures data now and has to think about how are we going to present knowledge to the world if we have this mission of making knowledge easy to access and be understood and accessible to all and yada yada yada. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, these dudes were worried about that when it came to the printing press and books and so forth. And then I was thinking about Lyotard, because Lyotard talked about genre, and he didn't the classification of knowledge, he was quite concerned that it wasn't as positive as as some people thought, because there's a way in which the classification of knowledge is to reduce fear of things that you might just stumble into that you don't want to know. So if someone else is taking care of segmenting knowledge and making it clean and organized and so forth, you're removed of the burden of having to figure things out on your own and potentially stumbling into something that you didn't want. So genre is never really just about, hey, I find this pleasurable, that's my thing, right? It's also about excluding things that you don't want to have messing up your clean categories. And this is not necessarily a very healthy thing, potentially. So, and this is a very interesting thing in the moment that we're in now with the internet and the struggle to categorize knowledge, and the situation where people are now getting so offended by everything under the sun because categorization, as Lyotard worried about, and this many years ago, creates a discomfort with anything that emerges unexpected and you can't categorize it. This is the basis for horror, right? So what is it in a horror movie that makes you scared? Is it the blood and the guts and the gore and the axes and the chainsaws? Not necessarily. In horror studies, if you ever get into film history and so forth, the real horror is the extraordinary disruption of order. So why do so many horror movies, like Kubrick was a master of this, and always looking at self says, yes, the music, and you're right, music is involved here. But if you think of the use of bathrooms in Kubrick movies, for example, what is a bathroom? A bathroom's and bathrooms just in horror movies in general. A bathroom is a clean, orderly space, or it's supposed to be, right? Kitchens, clean, orderly space. Just think of The Shining, right? And how all these things get out of order. Is the horror the scary woman in the tub in The Shining? Is the horror in the fridge in the kitchen in there and all the knives and stuff? Is it the order, or is it how things get disordered in those environments? And David Cronenberg makes all these movies where it's really about clean space being soiled. And there's a book to read on this called Powers of Horror, an essay on objection by Julia Kristeva. Very heavy-duty reading. I like it. It's really good, but it's hard. It's hard to read, but very good. It'll blow your mind. But you're right that it is the music always looking at self. Because music, right, either breaks into silence or it has atonal elements or unexpected elements that break the expected cadence to accentuate the horror. And I wouldn't necessarily call it the source of horror itself, unless it's coming organically from the scream of a character, but that's breaking order. So Bruno did this. Bruno very much disturbed the order of classification with his references to what? To space, right? And to infinity, to time. And how time and space are divided is a very complicated subject. A book you can read is A World Without Time by Palais Yorgrau. Really good book. And there he's talking about Gödel's incompleteness theorem and all this stuff. And in a way, why that's worth mentioning and it's not an abstract kind of thing is because everything is incomplete. There's a power in understanding the incompleteness of all things at this moment, because it helps reveal the completeness of the things at this moment, right? Because it is both. It is both complete and incomplete at the same time. And this problem with categorization is the coming into existence, coming into awareness of knowledge that seems to destroy the foundations, which is the deep anxiety that all culture has at all moments, right? Which is in the Greek tradition of Oedipus. Oedipus is not about a dude who does outrageous things with his mom and kills his dad. It's about a guy who's representing a society in change, and he has to guide the society through this moment of change and this disruption of categories and so forth. And he takes responsibility on himself to figure out the source of the problem, and has to admit that ultimately he's the source of the problem, because he's the one doing the categorizing at the end of the day as the king. Anyway, a little bit of a related side path to follow, but very, very interesting. So that's Lyotard. And then, of course, we have Yeats here. Yeats, who wrote The Art of Memory. Although she's an interesting figure, and she tells us a lot about Bruno in another book on Bruno, but also in The Art of Memory. Um, and that is very, very interesting to think about, particularly because Yeats makes this stunning, damaging admission that she never actually used memory techniques. So she's got the position of having one of the most famous books in the world about this, but about memory techniques, but she never used them herself. So it's a very interesting book to think about. And then just thinking about Shigwa Jifa and Matteo Ricci also needs to be in here. And so the Memory Palace of Matteo Ricci is something really to think about a lot. All right, so let me know if you have any questions about what we've been doing so far. We're going to proceed. We're almost halfway through our little mind map here. If you're just joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world. This S here is to refer to Luria and Luria's S, which is a moment where, and it's really good to read about that, because it's a moment where memory becomes something perplexing and strange in the memory science, and we're now into like the sort of the modern world in a really interesting way that I find extraordinary to think about how that, with Lyotard and genre classification and so forth, we have a moment where science begins to classify memory and be concerned with memory at different levels. It starts to segment what memory is and to approach memory in different ways. And, there's so many people to think about here. And I really should have had Hermann Ebbinghaus in between here. But this is the beauty of mind maps, is you could just switch in there and do something to put in Ebbinghaus, so maybe a big E here. But for some reason, while I was doing this, Luria's S came to mind, but we should really think about Ebbinghaus as well. Suraj is here from India, just joined. Thanks for being here, Suraj. Thanks for saying hello. Let me know if you have questions about any of this. But even with Ebbinghaus and Luria, it's still this kind of segmentation about particular concerns about particular kinds of memory. Now, of course, we can go with James before that, William James and his stuff on memory, which I believe historically would be previous to that. We can think about Freud and memory, of course, as well, with the unconscious, which is previous to that. And of course, we don't get Freud without Nietzsche, and we don't get Nietzsche without Schopenhauer, and yada yada. So we can go all the way back to Aristotle and Plato if we want, and we should, because it's very, very enriching and enlightening and elucidating and edifying to know all these things, and it's very powerful. So mind maps are cool. Thank you, Mr. Bizan, because just more stuff is coming out of my brain, and I didn't even put it there before. But you can just go and add to your, or I can make a whole new mind map just about the science of memory that I've discovered. I mentioned Stephen Kosslyn before. He would be in this segment about science for sure. But my major point here is the super segmentation of memory as an object and a subject of study for which we can produce data. And Ebbinghaus is really important here because he was like an n=1 kind of guy, studying his own retention, his duration, his volume, and of what kinds of material and the rate of decay. So we get this idea of the forgetting curve, we get the primacy effect, we get the spatial positioning effect, and we get the recency effect, which are all very powerful to understand and can set you free. And then, you got von Rostorff effect, and there's many effects. And the more you know, the more you can improve your memory practice, along with the ugly sister effect. And it's just like, you open that door and you just have so many things to play with that are fun. So there's that. And then this penny here is also to mention at least 2 times. Well, actually, we better call it at least 3. So we've been talking about Bruno and Ramus and all these dudes because there were a lot of them. And when the printing press opened up, just this gushing of material about memory entered the world. And one of them, of course, is this beauty, which is still with us. It's 2018 and we get it again. Isn't that amazing? Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. So, but it's coming from really a gold rush of possibility for the dissemination of printed literature. And so I put this penny here because around this time with Ebbinghaus and other sorts of people around that area, you had all these books coming out in the pulp fiction era, right? So there's just dozens of people to mention who put out these memory training books, focus books, concentration books, and one of the interesting things is if you really look into that era, that literature, they were about general self-improvement. They were about wealth generation. They were about um, freeing your mind from worry and doubt and like all this stuff. But the mass amount of production was enabled by what the printing presses were doing in order to make the distribution of literature much cheaper. And incidentally, it's not just about the printing press refining its ability to disseminate literature about memory and just literature as such. Novels, penny dreadfuls. That's why I put the penny there to trigger that era. But it was also about the cheapening of train transport by which books and literature could be delivered from town to town, and also the coming in of different forms of transmission of text through teletype and or all the wire transfers and all that jazz. So that's like all there. And then I drew a little like Kindle here because the next time it happened, and we're still in it, is all of a sudden this wealth of new memory information, memory training came out through Kindle because everybody and their uncle could write a book about memory training and put it on a Kindle book. And some are quite good, others are atrocious. But that's the beauty of a free market, right? You can sink or swim. Cream may or may not rise to the top. There's obviously problems with the way the Kindle works and how it enables a certain destruction if people wanted to destroy the standing of really good material. But in any case, that's what that was all about. Then here I have a deck of cards. Pick a card, any card. Anybody know what I might be referring to with that thing in my little history, a brief, condensed, selective history of memory training in the world of memory improvement books. Anybody can guess what this pick a card, any card might be. Let me know in the chat. And I'm just going to show you this again because this is beautiful. In the sun. I really enjoy this as an object, as a book that is beautiful in and of itself, and great knowledge. So would you like to know, I guess I better put it that way, would you like to know what this deck of cards represents and the memory tools that it can unlock for you? If you are aware, and I'm sure many people are, let me know in the chat if that interests you, or if we call it a day and do the rest on a different time. We want to see some interaction here. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. I really enjoy making these mind maps. It's so good that Tony put out a new book, Mind Map Mastery. Having a lot of fun refining my practice with it. And if you haven't gone and registered for the webinar, magneticmemorymethod.com/BK, that's going to give you 5 memory improvement books that no one has been mentioning, and 5 powerful secrets inside of them. So go and watch that. If you're just joining the replay, scrubbing through this, or watching it from beginning to end, also hit the thumbs up, and let me know what your thoughts are as a person watching the replay in the discussion below, and go watch the previous replays. There's often very, very interesting discussions. I'm so happy that YouTube enabled the chat replay window to be there so that people could watch it, which is a lot of fun. So no one's interested in that. I guess I can start to wind down here, but we don't get a single hell yeah for the next part of our mind map. No problemo. Really enjoyed meeting everybody today. It was a lot of fun, and I'm really, really excited to continue doing this work for you. We're going to carry on with the 5 books that no one's been mentioning at the webinar at the end of this week, and there's going to be a ton of secrets unlocked, but 5 that we're going to focus on. 5 that you'll be able to put into practice immediately, and this PDF. Julie's here, says I'm here. What do the cards represent? Okay, we can get 1. Wow, that was a long wait. That was a long wait. Thank you, Julie. But it's not carrot and stick here, but the engagement really, really matters. It really matters. And if you're off watching other tabs or you're just like passively engaged, ask yourself, do you have a brain that is leading, or what is this this knowledge that you're engaged in? Always looking at self. Yes, next part, please. Sandra says, no, please explain. Jeff says, I thought I was too late. I don't know. There's a delay. That's why I was delaying. But I want to see that you guys are awake. I don't like talking to a wall. Really, really important to use this live technology for what it is to be live with each other, to be engaged. So Gustavo's here from Argentina, arriving a little late. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for saying hello. Really, really great. And we'll carry on. So no guess on the cards in this thing, but it's Harry Lorraine, right? So Harry Lorraine has an interesting story in memory, of course, and I'll leave it to him to tell that. But it involves a building, of course, and a very special building indeed. And I really liked that I was able to live in New York, so I know a little bit about the hood that he's talking about in that story. Actually, I know a great deal about it, but one of the reasons why I have so many memory palaces in New York is because my wife at the time was a real estate agent, and I used to go around to a lot of the showings, and it was kind of cool, meet a lot of interesting people that way and see a lot of buildings that most people don't get to see when they live in New York from the inside. So that was cool. Anyway, yeah, and Julie says, haha, Harry, of course. Yeah, well, not a lot of people know that Harry Lorraine was also a magician. So, he is. He's, as far as I know, like as of not too long ago, he's on YouTube doing tricks. He's just whipping them out left, right, and center. And like Paul Gertner's at the table with him watching Harry Lorraine do his thing. It's like really wild and amazing. So that's cool. But Harry Lorraine, he really brought so much to this because he's like a real character, and he's really able to show the passion and the practical application of these techniques for things like names. Like names was his big thing, and he obviously uses memory techniques a lot in his routines. Maybe just in a practical sense of memorizing the names of the people he's doing magic tricks for. But if you know Harry Lorraine and you've seen him perform magic, and there's a lot on YouTube, like his collection of magic tricks in his mind that he can just pull out is incredible. Julie says, yeah, the YouTube videos on Harry Lorraine are great. So really, really important guy to read, and I just am so glad I got to spend some time, only on the phone, never in person, but he really helped me a lot at the beginning of my career as a teacher, and really understanding a lot of what to do to help people in really deep and authentic ways. So, and as you know, that's of the utmost importance. So, Harry Lorraine, and one of the other things that really comes to mind about Harry Lorraine is the actual importance of being connected with people through not only names, but taking the time to be with people and to really, really create. If you're going to create knowledge for people, create a lot of it, right? So it's this principle of you've got to help people open the perspective, because one is never enough. One is a dangerous number. So that's another virtue and value that I learned from Lorraine. And moving on, I also learned that from Tony Buzan. So here we have the world. First of all, we have brain, right? And then we have the world to represent the World Memory Championships. And then we have a little old floppy to represent software, because mind mapping you can also get software for. And then I just think, when I was thinking about Tony Buzan, I think of he has the Brain Trust, which is a charity thing. And then I think of these are mountains and a guy going up the mountains, which reminds me of the cool things that Nelson Dulles has been doing for charity with Climb for Memory. And I also think of, this is my poor attempt at the medical symbol, the snakes on the staff there, Alex Mullen. And these two guys are real inspirations. Some of the reasons that they're inspirations, not only Nelson's charity thing. By the way, Nelson has a new book coming out. He sent me an advance copy. So I'm going to be reviewing that and give it my fullest attention, as I am with Tony Buzin's Mind Map Mastery. But also, I find these guys really, really inspiring because they both seem to really take physical health very seriously in their own ways, but they express that concern with physical health, and I find them both very, very inspiring on that account as well. Because a lot of it's not a problem, but one of the issues with memory techniques is they'll work for you even if you're not really taking care of your body, but they'll work so much better if you're also taking care of diet and sleep and hydration and so on. So they make it physically real. You see how healthy they are. You see how fit they are and their big muscles. They might not be talking about it, but it's very, very important and very inspiring to me, especially since I had so many health troubles, and I'd be this basically a jackass with drinking like crazy and memorizing everybody's name anyway, and not particularly proud of it, but that's what I used to do. And it's like the memory techniques still work, but man, they work a lot better. I haven't had it. Jonathan Levy and I, we swore that we would never drink again. We did a podcast where we're drinking wine. We didn't get trashed or anything like that, but after that, we swore we would never drink alcohol again. And to my knowledge, neither of us have. The only thing that happened is I was invited to a ceremony at one of his family functions, at a next time that I visited him, and it was a Jewish thing, and they were passing around this thing, and I didn't even realize it was wine, and I had this tiny little sip, and I was like, oh, I guess I broke our pact, and he was like, yeah, I just pretend or something like this. And anyway, but other than that little tiny amount of alcohol that I had, I never have had any since that we made that pact, and I feel so good. I continue to like feel better and better and better. I have to imagine that alcohol detox takes forever. Not that I was ever an alcoholic, but I overdid it. I was in a band, traveling all the time, drinking, and I think I used alcohol as an antidepressant too for a lot of years. And so, anyway, I'm just very inspired. The whole point is, and like, there's a lineage here, right? Because World Memory Championships inspire people like Nelson and Dallas and Alex Mullen to go and to join them and so forth. And then they do amazing things, but they're also taking care of their bodies. And Buzan himself is a proponent of health and rowing, and he's a super healthy guy. Like when I met him, he's just like, wow, like not only dapper and chipper, but he's ripped. So it was really great. Sandra says Lorraine was one of the first books that introduced me to number mnemonics. Oh, cool. Julie says sometime I'd like to hear about those phone calls with Lorraine and what he said to you. Well, Julie, if you're in the masterclass, so it's in there. It's just for masterclass people, actually. Well, one of them anyway. Julie says drinking and remembering people's names. Yeah, well, I don't recommend it, but it does work. It does work. Gustavo says I haven't drank one single cup of alcohol in 6 months and transitioning to veganism. It feels really good. Oh, congratulations, Gustavo. That's great to hear. But yeah, my point is I'm really inspired not just by their memory stuff, but also, and Jonathan Levy as well, although he's not really from the Buzan lineage, but he not only did he inspire me and we made that pact together, but when I was barely able to walk, he helped me get back on my feet and really spent time going through research with me, figuring out what I could do, and also just being, what do you call it, like moral support, maybe not moral support, but support to get through it. So Siraj says, Lorraine says the problem with him is not remembering but forgetting. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard him say that. I've heard Jill Price say that. I think her name's Jill Price. She's had that problem with hyperthymesia, but I haven't heard Lorraine say that. Anyway, we're coming full circle now, and the magnetic memory method is the last one, and it's a flag, and it also has a globe in it to represent the passion here for something that is really unique in memory training, which is focus on large learning topics but languages, which is what the flag is all about. How can you use these techniques for language? Because I went through all these guys. They might say things about language, maybe a page or two, but you can tell that they're not doing it en masse. They haven't come into the problems that you encounter. And I really went deep into that topic because I needed to figure it out. I needed to figure it out fast. I needed to figure it out substantially. And I needed to learn about how languages are learned as such, and then figure out everything we talked about today. How can you segment things so it scales and do it meaningfully and understand it in the fullest context of what language learning really is, and using spatial memory and using things like, well, I'm pointing back to Buddha here, using things like relaxation, mindfulness to do it, and then going back to this didgeridoo here and the memory code and the tradition of survival, how memory techniques help us survive. Well, if we're going to survive, if we have any hope in hell as a species, it's going to be through our ability to communicate in multiple languages. So that's been a huge part of the focus of magnetic memory method, and it works for the people who use it. And it's just about large learning topics in general. So that's really, really important, but not just in isolation, not just as a language, to learn a language as such, but to learn how to relax better, to communicate in a relaxed manner, to be open, to be free, to have confidence, to have courage, to have a clarity of mind and the competence over all these disciplines that all these people can help you do. And you just knock them down one at a time. You just keep reading the tradition and keep coming back to things. And most importantly, actually implement, right? So you study the techniques, you implement them, and then you practice them with information that improves your life. That's what we do. SIP, right? Take it one sip at a time. Study these techniques, implement them. When you get on a roll, this is for me, then you practice it, but practice with the information that improves your life. Because what's that going to do? It's going to create this little engine of inspiration that leads to competence, that leads to clarity, that leads to courage, that leads to all the things that you need to ultimately have control over what's in your brain here. Control over the chemicals, the chemical location that we knew about, that Thales knew about, that the ancient people knew about. And they maximized, and they cherished, and they cultivated in order to survive. And more than survive, to thrive, to flourish, to bring to us all these things that we still have access to this day, and that we will have access to at the end of the week on this webinar at magneticmarymethod.com/BK, the 5 books that no one seems to have talked about that are really the most powerful, and the 5 secrets within them that you can use right away. And I'm going to give you a PDF with all the titles that I've mentioned, and I want to thank every one of you who has mentioned your titles in this chat, because they're going to be added to this PDF. And, it's going to be a very good PDF, and I hope that you make sure that you take the time to get it. And Timothy says, I read a book called Your Memory Bank and How to Use It by Asher El-Kayam. It's excellent. Oh, that's great. I've not known that one, but I'm definitely got to look into it. And thanks for mentioning it. Julie says, Anthony, thanks for sharing things that have happened to you personally through using the techniques. My pleasure, Julie. So I just don't know what I would do without this. And I have boundless, endless energy for teaching them, because they saved my life. And I want them to save the lives of others as well. Because no matter how bad it gets, it's happening here, and you have everything you need to turn it around. And it's not the Tony Robbins, rah, rah, rah. It's not the meaningless, blah, blah, blah. It's actual something you can do right now if you just will take the opportunity. And if you're telling yourself a story, well, yeah, then you maybe need the Tony Robbins, rah, rah, rah. You maybe need the cheerleading. And I do some cheerleading myself because it has its place. It's important. And Tony Robbins helped me lots. But how? How did Tony Robbins help me? Because he said on his recording, get out a piece of paper, write down some stuff, right? And then he says, stop the tape. It was tapes back then. And then when you press play again, and even if you didn't stop it, he's like, did you stop the tape? Did you do it? Right? And it's so important that you actually do that stuff. Because if you don't do it, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. And I saw him recently here in Brisbane. It was the most amazing thing in the world. And part of me went as a skeptic, because I was like, yeah, you helped me a lot because I stopped and did your exercises and so forth. But what's it going to be like in real life? Like, are you really going to be the guy in the recordings when you're in person and all that stuff? Turns out it was amazing. It was amazing. Parts of the event, other people, I was just like, does he really know these guys are there? But whatever. The thing itself was incredible. But he made the point again and again and again and again. It's like, you want anything to happen in your life, you got to do stuff. You got to do something. Do anything. And maybe do the things that the teachers you admire are suggesting that you do to get the results. But just do it, because nothing's going to happen if you don't do it. And all this stuff about like getting out a piece of paper and doing stuff on paper, you think that there might be some wisdom in there? Well, that wisdom has been getting more and more important as digital amnesia and digital dementia rise and destroy so much of our ability to think for longer than 2 seconds, which I think is a myth. But it's a myth with truth in it, because all myths have a bit of truth. And I notice it even myself. It's just an en masse training through the technology to want not just instant results, but instant engagement when knowledge doesn't work that way. Anything worth learning is going to take some commitment to paying attention. And if we're in a world where we have to have it within 2 seconds, or like people are gone and they're trained and encouraged to be gone through linking and like these ads that pop up and blah, 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 and yada, 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 that have no relevance to us, and we're like getting more and more impatient and so forth. This is just a twitchy, weird world, and it's not going to go to a good place, right? So we've got to, paper is even more important. Spending time with it, right? And not expecting perfect at all. Progression. But you've got to put your time into it. And you've got to, this is why the Buddha thing, I'm not a Buddhist or anything like that, but that image of focus and clarity and calm and just in it, man. It's so important, because if you don't cultivate it for yourself, you're going to be sucked along with the speed of engagement and the speed of presentation of information to judgment. But you got to slow that stuff down. You got to be detached. You got to let go of the outcome of things and have a broader view. And this mind map stuff is really great, because you can see at a glance the stuff in the mind. And then if you do something like present it to somebody else, then you notice, oh, wait a second, where's Ebbinghaus, right? And you got to stick that Ebbinghaus in there. And you learn so much about what you don't know what you don't know. And how do you get to know what you don't know? Well, you spend time with knowledge. Northrop Frye, the Canadian scholar, he said something very, very profound. He said all poems come from other poems. Well, all books come from other books. All mind maps come from other mind maps. If you don't know how to mind map, you make a mind map. All memory palaces come from memory palaces. You don't know how to make a memory palace, you make a memory palace. It's like that simple. And if you're just sitting there humming and hawing, sitting on the fence, I don't know, I don't understand enough. If you're waiting to understand it, you're waiting too long. You understand by doing it. That's the DOC principle of the magnetic memory method. Doing is the origin of everything you need to know. Doing is the origin of the competence, right? But if you don't do, you don't get the competence. It's that simple. So that's just a riff on Julie's comment there. That says, thank me for sharing things that have personally helped me. It's doing that helps. It's the doing. And there's so much richness in it. And all the stories, well, I don't have time, or it takes time. It doesn't actually take time. It gives you time. It gives you time in a big fat bundle for you to do whatever the heck it is that you want, if you just submit to the rules, because the rules will set you free. They really will. And it's just, no matter what happens, you don't know the future. You simply cannot know what's going to come. So you have to let that go and become the master of the moment. And how is the best way, I think, to become the master of the moment? Well, it's the only way to become the master of the moment, which is to become a master of the mind and the memory that the mind is, right? Because you are the sum of what you can remember at any given moment. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's a very good thing to be able to realize. It's an amazing thing to be able to realize. It's the most important thing to realize and then to bring under your competence. So that's why doing is the origin of the competence of that control. So Timothy says, hi from Baltimore, Maryland. Good morning, Baltimore. I love that song. Oh, thanks for saying hello and let me know where you are. Gustavo says, I'm practicing remembering 14 NLP patterns from Robert Dilt's book. Oh, Sleight of Mouth. I love that book. That's a great book. My house being my memory palace. I'm still a newbie at this. Really, really great. Number one tip, Gustavo, more than one memory palace. Don't stop at your house. Rip them out. Build as many as you can. Create as many as you can. You're not really going to, well, I'm not going to say you're not going to understand it. Maybe some people will get it from the first time, but I didn't get just how profound and powerful a memory palace can be until I made multiples. You're not going to unlock it in your mind until you make them in multiples. And I mean multiples. And, it's as obvious as daylight to me in hindsight, and it's as obvious in daylight to all the people who just submit to it and do it. But then you got to use the memory palaces. Number one mistake is that people just don't even use the memory palaces they make. So commit, commit, commit. Maybe I got to add that to the DOC. So doing is the origin of courage, doing is the origin of competence, doing is the origin of creativity, doing is the origin of control. It's the origin of commitment. Because you'll prove to yourself just how powerful it is. Julie says, very deep. I like it. Well, thank you, Julie. I appreciate it. Deep is interesting. I mean, we're not trying to be deep and super intellectual or anything like that. But it is deep. It's as deep as you want it to go. And, my friend Jonathan Levy, he always says, some things are here for a reason, a season, or a life. And that's a very profound way of thinking about things. So I think that all people would benefit from mastering memory techniques, but it's not like you have to be memorizing everything all day long. It was great just chatting on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast with Nelson Dellis. If you haven't heard that, you've got to hear it, because he unpacks something that we all go through when we get into memory techniques that has to do with the responsibility of this great power and just how on you have to be. I mean, you can take a break, you can take a rest, and it might help you to overcome any objections you have to getting started, because a lot of people feel a responsibility in advance. They have that sort of Spider-Man moment with great power comes great responsibility from Uncle Ben, right? Well, that could be stopping a lot of people in advance. They could be like putting all these objections because, hey, if I actually can learn and remember stuff, yikes, I might have to be better at my job because I will be better, right? Which costs energy and so forth. There's a little thing in the brain, the insular cortex, that creates a little pain response anytime that you're presented with a wonderful and amazing opportunity to grow and become a better person that says, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. That means that I'm going to have to do more stuff, which is not necessarily true. It's weird. It's wrong of the brain to do that. It's counterintuitive, because when you get smarter and you learn more, then you can figure out ways to release yourself from a lot of operational activities, and you can create the resources that you need to release yourself from a lot of operational activities, but you do need to submit yourself to a bit of discipline and structure and so on. So it's really, really important to understand this. Gustavo says, I found that my old houses brought some nostalgic memories that distracted me, so I can't use those yet. Yeah, Gustavo, that's par for the course. It'll happen. It's happened to me. There's some memory palaces I don't use. There's hospitals I've stayed in that I'm obviously not going to use. There's relationships I've been in where I could reuse those memory palaces, but I'm obviously not, because I don't want to be thinking about those people or some of the memories that they might engage. But at the same time, it's maybe good to clean them up here and there and then. Don't give up on them necessarily, although you can cut your losses. I've cut my losses on a lot as well. Gustavo says, yeah, I will walk around my city stealing palaces from the places I visit. Yeah, well, don't have to think of it as theft. It's free resource, free real estate. But by all means, whatever metaphors and frames that you like, dive in. I mean, think of it as you will. I just raise a cautionary note that if you're talking about having bad memories from memory palaces already, then the metaphor of stealing is a slightly negative connotation. So if you're sensitive to bad memories in places, why make new ones have even the slightest scent of negativity, such as theft, because theft is very negative. So maybe change how that thinking is there if it's not working out for you. Suraj says, I have 11 memory palaces now, visiting more places to create more, but after watching your masterclass video, I realized I was doing it wrong. I was stuck in my memory palace without an exit. Yeah, Suraj, that's one of the biggest problems. And you're going to find that this solves it. It's going to give you that constellation effect, and It's going to be the path to getting the constellation effect, and it's a huge part of it. And don't underestimate that. And the amount of time I spent trying to figure out, okay, I'm getting good results with this, but there's something wrong. There's something wrong, and how long it took me to figure it out. It's like, oh my God, everybody's teaching the memory palace completely wrong. If you just do it a little bit differently, it's that simple. So that's a game changer. There's a couple other game changers. So you're in the masterclass, excellent. Keep going through it. Revisit the masterclass often, because a lot of stuff connects over time. You bolt it on. That's why we talk about SIP, one sip at a time. Study these techniques, implement them, practice them with the information that improves your life, and then come back and study some more, because you unlock your perspective one sip at a time, and it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, because there's so many things that you can't see, and it's true for myself as well, which I find very good, is the energy it creates, the full knowledge that I don't even know so much of what is to be known about memory is the most exciting and exhilarating thing. And you're going to know it through practice. You're going to know it through coming back to the techniques, which is why I always read the tradition. I always come back to it. And I read new things. Like Nelson Dellis sends me his new book. I'm on it. New Tony Buzan, I'm on it. Because it just adds a new layer, a new depth, using Julie's word, deep. It's like going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into it and refining the practice and learning more about what we talked about earlier, which is discernment about the things, maybe we don't need to do that, or maybe we leave that for a while and come back to it. It's extraordinarily powerful what happens when you spend time with an art and a craft and a science and you really develop it. You wouldn't expect a painter to just develop all this stuff out of nowhere, right? But a painter who just follows the rules can make some pretty extraordinary things very, very quickly, and then they refine and they refine and they refine. And then you look back over their history and you might be like, 67 to 68, their preoccupation with cattle was a little distracting, but overall you can see the development of their general practice, and thank God they got back to vases or whatever, right? So it's like, that kind of thing is really important, to think of yourself as the artist of your mind, but also the scientist and the craftsperson. Julie said, I just started listening to your podcast. Great. Well, thanks for listening to the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. Wow, we've got a lot of episodes, and last week with Jesse Villalobos was great. We got a second part to that coming up, and I want to talk to more of you. I'm thinking of doing like a call-in show about memory techniques. Have to get a screener though. Never, on the crazy people suddenly yelling weird things at the top of their lungs on the phone, which I'm sure would never happen, but whatever. Gustavo says, thanks, Anthony. I'll change the perspective on the real estate I visit. It's all about learning and improving myself. It is. It's a lifelong journey, and it's going to get better and better and better the more you practice. So, speaking of practice, going to keep on practicing my mind maps, because I found that this is really, really great. I enjoyed each and every moment of using it to formulate what I said there. And Julie says April could be your screener. Well, yeah, maybe. I think she would enjoy that, actually. I'll ask her, see if she's into that. But I hope that I demonstrated the power of this, because I was able to remember everything that I wanted to say from the mind map. And then I made some connections that I didn't make before, and I feel very strongly that this is a practice anybody should do. So Mind Map Mastery is a great book. I'm going to be doing the formal review of it, of course, and do a couple more mind maps, because they're really, really great for opening your perspective. And this is, of course, I'm doing a new book now and really investigating it and so forth. But I want this to be the best book ever, and I really appreciate every single one of your chats that are there. I'm going to ask Anna to go through it and add them to our mega thing that we're going to give you on the next webinar later this week. So if you're not registered, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/BK. Talk about the 5 memory improvement books no one seems to have mentioned, and how that they can help you unlock so many secrets. Speaking of April, she's home. We're going to have some lunch. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. Come visit me at come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com, and go to magneticmemorymethod.com/BK. Check out the podcast like Julie's doing, and come back and watch this replay if you missed it, and if you are watching the replay now, please do hit that thumbs up. Let me know in the discussion where you are watching from, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and thanks for the time we spent today. Thanks for mentioning those books and resources. And Gustavo says, stay magnetic. Yeah, thank you, Gustavo. You as well. Keep yourself magnetic. Everybody, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun today, and we are looking forward to many, 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 many more sessions with you, and appreciate the opportunity to spend the time with this tradition with you, because we want to keep it growing and flowing throughout all of human history so that people can learn and remember, because the more you learn, the more you can learn, the more. And until we have a chance to speak again, keep yourself magnetic. Bye bye.